Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody. You wanna be like me.
Hey, everybody. This is Youth Worker on Fire. It's Doug Edwards, your host. I've got Joel Johnson with me today. Joel is a national, international speaker. He went to Bible college, got his doctor's degree, and has done studies at Harvard. So he's got a couple of things going on here. A very, very difficult childhood. An encounter with Jesus led him to speaking to his student body. Now, this really got me. I love this because I listened to one of your YouTube stories from a few years ago, Joel, and it was the clearest thing about you're standing up and calling attention to your classmates at lunchtime and sharing the gospel.
You had to creep deep for that one.
I went deep.
Well, there's a very, you're walking on the edge of the knife between keeper and creeper. Just wanted to let you know. But great investigatory side on your part. Yeah,
hey,
that's great.
YouTube, man. YouTube has got it all. It's just going to
live forever.
It's going to dig it out, right? But it was so good as far as a highlight, and then looking at your new book and some of those things. But no wonder God started using you, because there is something unique about a child in his teenage years, especially in high school, you know this, that would stand up and call attention to, in a public school, to say, listen, I got something to tell you. This is what happened. I had an encounter with Jesus. It changed my life. And I want you to go into that story a little bit, because I think it's unique to everything else that happened in your childhood. You know everything I'm talking about. My audience doesn't. Some of them will know you. Some of them will not. Some of you are cringing at the thought of a student in your youth ministry that would do that. Some of you are going, that is amazing. I wish I had a student like that. And so you're going through all kinds of emotions as youth workers of how you would be a part of that, just to have a student, if you had just one student that would do something like that in their life. So in your young life, you spoke to hundreds of thousands through Acquire the Fire and other events like that. You're on a mission to help others heal from their childhood trauma through this new book, Wholehearted University, 7 Skills to Develop a Wholehearted Life in a Heartbreaking World. That forward is by John Eldredge. Some of you know about John Eldredge, Wild at Heart. To get him to do that means that guy likes you.
Yeah, even the John Eldredge tolerates me. I'm blessed beyond words. He's been a mentor from afar for over 20 years. I picked up his book in my early 20s, Wild at Heart, and of course it wrecked me in such a great way. So for decades, he's been my mentor. Even before I remember so clearly, I would be going through his workbooks, like in my morning devotionals before I'd be at an Acquire the Fire event in an arena talking to teenagers. And there'd be me doing my work, growing, and being initiated into my manhood, but also working through the trauma of my wounds. John's a therapist, so a lot of his spiritual work is infused with also healing works of the mind, of the heart, all of those things that he's been doing for decades. So yeah, he's been a mentor from afar. About 5 years ago, we met in a green room. Somehow I started FaceTiming with him, and he still allows me to meet with him and mentor. His mentorship is huge for me in my life and in this work. So to have him write the foreword is a dream come true, and I'm forever grateful to you, John. My life has been changed and healed through his mentorship, that's for sure.
I can imagine. And I can imagine also that he is thrilled to have you as a part of his life. I've got to hear him speak one time at Youth Pastor Summit with Jay Strack. I don't know if you know Dr. Strack or not.
Yeah, not personally, but if you're listening, Dr. Jay, I would love to hang out with you sometime or be on your podcast. It'd be great.
Well, let me tell you what. I do send these to Dr. J here and there. He's been on Youth Work on Fire, and so has Brent Crow, his son-in-law, who is also the second guy, vice president of Student Leadership University and Youth Pastor Summit, all that stuff. So let me tell you what. You come to town sometime, we'll make sure we make an appointment. If Jay's in town, we'll find a way, okay?
I know there's a whole lot of you guys near Orlando. You guys have kind of come together. It's a beautiful town and great space over there in Orlando.
Well, in student ministry, you can't afford, most of us are too poor to go to Disney. We have to live near it.
Yeah.
That way we hope for a way in, and that's what we do.
Yeah, you get those, little soda pop cans that give you the discount if you're in the local area.
That's right. Now you know. The jig is up. That's why we moved here. No, but Jay, he's got quite a story on here concerning how he got to Orlando as well. But listen, he would be thrilled to spend time with you.
Well, okay, we'll set up the appointment.
We'll do it.
We'll definitely have to do that.
But listen, we want to go into sometime along the way here. You've got a movie that's coming out. The trailer is absolutely captivating.
Yeah.
By the way, that you sent me to watch, and thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're listening out there and you want to check it out, we'd invite you to go to wholeheartedmovie.com. And you can check out the trailer and get involved with that. Also at joeljohnson.org. Please be a friend, come over, leave a message. We'd love to have you there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the sort of things that we want to make sure we get. Is there any other way to get in touch with you that's non-invasive, but some place where you can go back and forth?
Yeah. On all the social media platforms, if you go to joeljohnson.org, just all one word, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of the social media platforms are Joel Johnson ORG. And my website, of course, is joeljohnson.org. So it's really simple. You can come and hang out on your preferred platform, whatever that may be. Also, if you want to come check out our Wholehearted podcast, we'd love for you to check that out. There's a whole lot of healing. I sit down with my co-host, Shannon White. She's a therapist, and we talk through, I bring things more from the resources of the kingdom of God and the biblical side. And she really gives some incredible practical tips. And we go through the 7 skills of my new book. And these 7 skills, 7 skills to live wholehearted in a heartbreaking world. These 7 skills are 7 skills Jesus used to stay wholehearted in his definitely heartbreaking world, oppressed by the Roman Empire and all of that he had to go through. So this is a really powerful thing for youth workers, for students to walk through and to really learn how to not only reclaim your heart, but also to retain your heart. As Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for out of it flows the issues of life. And all of our issues really are born out of the traumas we face in our heart, and learning to tend our heart, learning to reclaim it, have it be restored, and then retain it is one of the key things from the Jewish scriptures in the Old Testament all the way through to the New Testament, where Jesus proclaims his mission statement that says, I've come to heal the heartbroken, to set the captive free, as he's quoting Isaiah 61, verse 1. That's that powerful thing that God has been working on called our heart. And if you've grown up in Sunday school, where do we invite Jesus, right? We invite him into our heart, and we do that because his goal and his mission is to bind up those broken places, the traumas, the hurts, the experiences we've all faced. He wants to come in, make sense of them, bring unity in our heart within, and then unity with him, so that we can be one with God, that we can walk with God, that we can experience his life and a heart that's whole. And because until we do that, if your life is like a bucket with holes in it, God is pouring out more than enough of his life to fill us full. But when our heart is broken, it just seeps out of the cracks or the holes in our heart. And Jesus, that's why he wanted to come and bind up those places, so that our cup, like David in Psalms 23, he makes this connection. He says, you restoreth my soul in verse 3. And then in verse 5, he says, my cup overflows. And our souls, until our souls are restored or our hearts are bound up, our life will never overflow, like David mentioned in Psalms 23. So this is what the mission of the ministry is to continue the work of Christ and to say and to be a part of doing why he said he came when he quoted that, in the synagogue, Isaiah 61:1. And is to help hearts to become unified and made whole, because we'll never experience the abundant life Jesus promised. Then it becomes to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus said, but I've come to bring you life and that abundantly. Or the NIV version says life to the full, or the Message paraphrase says a better life than you dreamed of. And so this ministry is all about that for youth pastors who have maybe been broken or bruised. It's such a unique tension to be a youth pastor with a senior leader pastor and the parents and all of that. It's a really unique gift and position to walk, and it often leads to burnout, brokenness, betrayal, even all of those things that as youth workers we can't help but to experience while we're doing this work. This book is going to help put those pieces back together. It's going to help expedite the work that Christ wants to do in your life. And so that's what Wholehearted's all about, is to help bring those broken pieces that we all have and bring them unity within and with Christ. And we're seeing lives transformed around this country and around the world.
Well, and what I'm impressed with concerning that is that your book, you said there's 9 sessions. We're talking about $79, something like that.
Yeah. We have an online course is what you're talking about. It's Wholehearted University. Yeah, and you can check that out at www.wholehearted.university. But we have 9 sessions. It's created for small group leaders.
Yes.
And we literally, these 9 sessions, and we give a 10th bonus session in there, but these 9 sessions are easy to reproduce minute by minute. We take coordinators how to lead their group through this. And it's basically like, for people who, therapy is $100 to $300 a session, an hour, right?
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate in a way, because Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted, and part of therapy is all about that. And so what we've wanted to do is to say, hey, if you're a church, if you're even an individual, and you can't afford 10 sessions is $1,000. What we've put 10 sessions together for $79.99.
Well, that's why I thought that was a great deal. Yeah. I mean, that's because I have 3 friends that are therapists.
Yeah. Financial Peace University. This is Inner Peace University. Yeah. This is something that is running at churches. We've had it since it's been available for a year. We have them starting in Hawaii, Southern California, Indiana, North Carolina. They're starting all over the country, and you can be a part. You can just go to the website, and there's videos, there's questions to ask to take you to go deeper. So I would love it if anyone listening to this, you can go to wholehearted.university, check it out. It's going to help your heart be restored. And some of us, if you're, since this is about youth workers, this podcast, a lot of us have felt the burnout. A lot of us, man, our heart is still youth, but we're on the sidelines for multiple different reasons. And so this is something, if you're a youth worker out there, you can go through this. You can walk through 9 sessions and your life is going to be transformed. You also get the digital book comes with that, and also the audio book comes with that, plus exercises to take you deeper. That's all connected also with our podcast. It'll lead you to links that correspond with each of the skills. So it's a powerful thing that people are experiencing around the country. And as a I've been a youth minister for many years and a youth speaker and for decades. So I understand that unique tension, and a lot of times how it can just break us or burn us out or create bitterness, all of those things. And that doesn't help anyone, especially yourself. And these 9 sessions are taking people from brokenness to wholeheartedness. People are they're getting unstuck. They're finding their passion for life again. They're finding their calling, and they're getting back on track into the purpose that God has created them for. So I know that was a whole mouthful, but I'm really excited about the work that it's doing all across the country. And I would hope that maybe even some of your listeners would say, man, that sounds like it's right up my alley and that could be helpful for me.
It is, and it can be. And that's what this podcast is about, by the way, is longevity. I was very fortunate to have a church that actually in their package, you had a sabbatical after 5 years. After I spent almost 30 years there and skipped 2 of them.
Wow.
After the first one, I had a heart attack at 49. After the second one, I resigned because not the second one I missed, not the ones I took. They refreshed me. And what I found is probably youth pastors need it every 4 years, not waiting to a 5th year, because a lot of them leave before 5 years. Most, in fact, leave after 18 months. And it's because of a lack of training. It's a lack of understanding by churches who to hire. But here's where I want to go from there. Catch us up to date, but let's start with that childhood story. You don't have to give us an in-depth thing about all of it, but it was so captivating to me to see where you came from and what happened in high school at that cafeteria and then where you are now.
Yeah, I'll start it back right before high school. I ended up going to a summer church camp, Bible camp that my mom forced me to go. It was right after my 8th grade years in the summer. And I ended up at this camp, but I had an incredible youth pastor and youth leaders. And I had some experience. I made Jesus Lord of my life at that camp, and he became so alive and so real to me. And so I took up a challenge to take my Bible to school my freshman year of high school. And I remember walking across the campus and I had my Bible underneath my binder and I was really nervous. You know, your freshman year, it's new, it's high school so big. You've heard of stories of hazing, all of that stuff is playing in my mind. I remember walking towards the school across the parking lot and I just remember taking a moment and I stopped and I took my Bible out hidden behind my binder and I just put it on the outside of my book and I walked into my campus and I, I put my Bible on the top of my desk, all my other books underneath my desk. And I remember people starting to ask me like, why do you have a Bible for? And I didn't know exactly what to say, but, my mouth was still very aggressive and you have to be kind of tough and be able to sling things back quickly. And I just looked at the guy who said, why do you have a Bible for? I'm like, to read? Is that moment where I'd made a decision, hey, I'm going to not only be a follower of Jesus, I want to make an impact on my high school campus. And that really started it. My sophomore year, my youth pastor, his name was Alex. I'll never forget him. He's such a good youth pastor. And he challenged me. He said, Joel, you know what? You should do something bold on your campus. Why don't you bring this white picket fence to school with you and carry it around from class to class? And we kind of came up with this idea of, well, you can't be on the fence. You're going to be either fully on fire for Christ, you got to go for it, or be on the other side and go live for the world, but don't be a fence rider. And so I carried this around for 7 school days. And people would be like, why do you have a fence, Joel? I'd be like, well, you can be on one side or the other. You can't be in the middle. You either can follow Christ and spend eternity in heaven, or you cannot, and you can spend eternity apart. And I would invite people to make a decision right then and there of, would you like to make Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior of your life? And the very first day, it was great. I got to lead a couple people to the Lord that first day. But then after that, it was kind of like people were making fun of me. People would steal my fence, throw it on top of roofs and make fun of me. That was kind of how I approached high school. There wasn't a Bible club, so I was the Bible club president. We started up the Rad Bible Club. It was an acronym in the 90s, the Rad Bible Club, and we would meet every week for a Bible study. And it was, people would attend, but mostly Christians. It's powerful. So my junior year, leading up to this moment of sharing the gospel on my campus, I was at youth group. It was a Wednesday night. And I remember my youth pastor, Alex, he was like, all right, if you want more of Christ, if you want more of him in your life, Why don't you come forward to the steps? And I made my way down, and I just remember praying and asking, like, God, I want more of you in my life. And in the middle of this, when you're trying to pray, even now, your brain starts to daydream or drift. And in that moment, I remember I was drifting and I was beginning to think about going to Taco Bell, which, we always would go after youth group or go someplace. And, I was thinking about eating, and all of a sudden, kind of breaking through this Taco Bell daydream, I saw myself standing up on this bench in the middle of Senior Square, which is a place where the seniors would eat and hang out. But in the middle of Senior Square, kind of that's where everyone congregated right after lunch. And then we all went back to, or right during lunch, near the end of lunch. And then we'd go to our classes. I saw myself standing on a bench in this daydream, preaching the gospel there. Then I felt like the conviction of the Holy Spirit just say, that's you tomorrow at lunchtime.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, no, God, like this, is this Satan? Like, who is saying this? So that night I couldn't sleep, and I just knew that he was asking me to do this. So the next day came around, I'm at school, it's lunchtime, but I'm on the other side of the campus, nowhere near Senior Square. I'm in the cafeteria sitting with all the Christian kids where we would sit, and I remember feeling just this compulsion of like, you need to go do this now. Like, you need to go preach the gospel. And so I stood up, and instead of going to Senior Square, I went over to this table of girls and I asked them to come to youth group. I was kind of like, well, maybe this will be good enough. And I remember one of the girls, as I was sharing about Christ and coming to youth group, she stood up and she said, you don't tell me about religious school. I've had 8 years of religious school. Don't tell me about this stuff. I know it, and she's going off on me.
Oh, wow.
And then she sat down, and the whole table of girls just ignored me. I was saying, it's not about, what are those lines I used to say in like high school? It's not about religion. It's about a relationship with Jesus Christ. The whole table of girls totally ignored me. And that feeling inside when they can hear you, but they're acting like they're ignoring you. It was like inside somebody was microwaving metal on the inside of me. And I put on my backpack and I literally began to pace back and forth in the middle of the cafeteria. I don't know. I was so angry and upset. I busted through the double doors of the cafeteria. There were these 8 guys sitting on this table. They were hoodlums. Back then they were wearing like hoodies and creased dickies. And I walked over to them and literally I said, hey, you guys need to know the Lord Jesus Christ. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth, you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Would you like to make him Lord of your life right now? And to my surprise, all 8 of them, they stood up and they said, yeah, we would. I grabbed hands with these 8 guys and I led them in the sinner's prayer. This is like a scene out of a movie, right? I led them in the sinner's prayer. And now I'm going to Senior Square, but now I got me a posse. So like I'm heading to Senior Square. I hop up on this bench. I stand up and I say, come around. I've got something to say. And, nobody moved forward except maybe the 3 chess club kids, and everybody's just looking at me. This is Senior Square. I'm a junior. I'm not even supposed to technically be in Senior Square. So I'm in there and people are just staring at me, about 400 of my classmates. I went to school with about 2,000 students there. And 400 of them are gathered around. And I just began to share and say, so many of us, we come to school with a mask on. You look happy. You look hard. You look whatever it is that you're coming to school with. But so many of our hearts are broken. I know my heart was broken. And Jesus was the only one who could put the pieces together. And he is the peace in my life. And it can be the peace in your life. All of a sudden, one of my vice principals came over and said, all right, young man, step down. I looked down at my vice principal, looked out at my peers again, and I just began to share the gospel. Jesus is the only way. He can save your life. He can heal your heart. And my other vice principal came up, all right, young man, step down. And I looked down at both of my principals, and what happened next, I will never forget. Because out of the crowd, I began to hear this from my peers. Let him speak. Let him speak. Let him speak. let him speak. And when I was done, I stepped down and my vice principal totally went off on me. What gives you the right? What gives you the right? I remember him getting in my face and, I didn't know what to say. And, I went to law school. I think this was the beginning of my Juris Doctorate studies in law. And I said, well, the Supreme Court versus Mergence case gives us our Student Bill of Rights, which gives us our rights to share our faith on campus. I guess that was the wrong thing to say because he was like, I remember his face. He was beet red. He's like, what are you, some kind of constitutional expert? I looked over at my other vice principal and I said, hey, some of our classmates have committed suicide this year. How can I be silent when I have the answer? And it's Jesus Christ. Some of you might be like, wow, that was pretty bold for a junior in high school, but my vice principals didn't think it was so bold, or maybe they really thought it was bold. So they sent me to the principal's office. Sitting down there at the principal's office, and the principal says, hey, you can never do this again on my campus. This is California, right? So that was church and state and being kind of more of a liberal state. He's like, you can never do this again. And as respectfully as I could, I said to my principal, I said, I can't promise you I'll never do this again, but before I do, if I ever do it again, I'll let you know prior. And I walked out of there. I didn't get suspended. I didn't get, expelled or anything like that. But I did get to lead 16 of my classmates to the Lord that next week and over that time where people were asking questions. So really, that was kind of the beginning of my start of so many things, of becoming a youth speaker. It was really the start of I could see the beginning of the wholeheartedness, even in my message that day when I preached, the future of, having a Juris Doctorate, being a student of the law. All of those things were in their amorphous form of being a young teenager coming into shape. But God had really touched my life and had really graced me. And the gifts that he was pulling out of me were in raw form. And I just love those memories. But we're continuing to do that work today and still seeing my generation who are facing a lot of brokenness and brokenheartedness. If we see it every day, what does Barna Stats say? That like 3,000 people approximately every day are leaving the church in the United States. So there's a lot of people on the sidelines. There's a lot of people facing church hurt, brokenness, burnout, all of that stuff. I guess I'm here today. If I could speak to you like that day on my campus, Jesus is the one who can heal your brokenness and your broken heart. I'm preaching that message maybe to my own generation again on this podcast to say, man, Jesus has been healing hearts for thousands of years. He's a master at it. And he can put the pieces of your heart and your soul back together. If you're in a place where maybe you're on the sideline or you're facing burnout or you've been betrayed or whatever, this is really a moment for you. And I really believe an encounter with Christ, that he has been knocking on the door of your heart, like Romans 12, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone would hear my voice and open the door, that I would come in and dine with them. And there's really this dining in your heart where he wants to come and have this communion and this deeper conversation and to help you work through the broken places, the bitter places that if you're a youth worker, you're going to have them. So I'm calling out to you once again, like that day on that campus, and I would just ask you to draw close to Christ. Maybe the university, the Wholehearted University, could be a great tool for you. But even without that, Jesus, if you'll invite him into those broken or bitter places of your heart, he's going to do what only he can do in a way that no therapist can do that. Definitely he can work alongside a therapist, but it's Jesus who's the master at healing your heart.
Here's a couple things. Number one, that people don't understand unless they already know you or know your testimony. I think your first father left you, went to be with a biker gang or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah. My father and mother actually met at Bible school.
Oh, wow. Oh,
and, my dad was in some gangs and stuff as a teenager, more of the 50th Street gang kind of, if someone pulled a knife, that would be extreme. It was mostly fist fighting on the streets and stuff like that. Yeah, he went to Bible school. He was involved with a large ministry. You would know their name. And I think he got burnt out and felt burned. And then the marriage wasn't everything that it was supposed to be. So my dad had an affair with a church friend and then decided that he was done with, this family and my older brother and I, and he moved in with this other lady and she had already had some kids. I was one when he left. So I was really faced abandonment as a child at those early years. And then for those of you who are into therapy, there's something called attachment theory, where even prior to us being born, but even before then, we begin as we're being formed in our mother's womb to make assumptions about what this world is like in the first 4 years of our life. This is how incredible this is, that if we can feel the nuances, if our mother, especially our mother, but our primary caregiver, if they are stressed or if they are not joyfully meeting our needs, they're not in an environment that they can do that. And so you have, adultery, betrayal, you have abandonment. All of this stuff was the world that I entered into. And so I didn't see the world as abundant. I came out with kind of this: the world is scarce, relationship, love is scarce. Get as much out of it as you can before they leave. And this really, it may be light bulbs for some people. If you grown up or had this experience in the first 4 years, we make these huge assumptions that affect the rest of our life in the first 4 or 5 years of our life, starting within the womb. So I say that to say, a lot of you, maybe if you're seeing repeats in your life, you're seeing the same things happen over and over, different situation, different time, different scenario, but the same things. A lot of those things happened before you could even put words to those things. And so we come out of the womb and we're in this world, and it's a traumatic experience to start off. We're not in Eden anymore, right? The human soul was made for Eden, and then our goal was to bring Eden to the rest of the world. And so our world, I mean, humans were made for Earth, but we weren't made for this world system. And it's so fast paced, breakneck. Find out what your purpose is, then be purposeful before you pass away. And so this is my story, and I'm just elaborating on it. I'm hoping people, light bulbs are beginning to pop off, that your life is so much deeper, and you really need Christ to enter in to these deeper parts and to enter into your story, because we often don't even understand our own story. And we enter into this human story that's really ancient. And then we've got to, it's like we enter in 20 minutes late for a movie. We're trying to figure out what the movie's about without asking a whole lot of questions. And then we leave before the movie ends, right? This is the human experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying this, that hopefully that those of you who are listening, you would say, wow, I need Jesus to come into my story. And I need to know my own story a little bit better, because maybe my perspective isn't as true and as deep, and understanding some of those things from our past, man, they just bring so much freedom, and they are a light as you progress forward and making new decisions and entering new places in your life. Man, it helps to have Jesus in your story, but it also helps when he's knocking on those places of your life. You keep finding yourself repeating the same places, the same scenarios, different people, different time, but same kind of situations. And Jesus uses those moments, those triggering moments, to knock on our door and to say, hey, let's talk about some of the things in your past so that we can heal those up. And what happens is a domino effect that oftentimes then you see the pattern in your life, and most of the things moving towards your presence begin to heal automatically if we can go back to some of those younger places in your life. And then, oh my gosh, I've seen people all around the country coming to these they're like different people because they heal some of those past traumas, just like me entering this world, single parent household. My mom would get remarried to my stepfather, and that's really where he was an alcoholic and he was abusive. And that's really where a lot of my deep seated things began, are just my trauma that as a child, you're making agreements about how you see the world, like love will always leave might be one, or my friends always betray me, or you can't trust men, or you can't trust whatever. All of these agreements we subtly make, and then you can go through something really traumatic like that. For me, my agreements were, I'm on my own. Life is up to for me to make it happen. Better keep up or it's going to run over you. You better grow up right now. It's all up to you. So that was my agreements. But when I was put in that situation as a elementary school student, all of those little agreements that I made were solidified and confirmed. Just all the abuse, it was physical and verbal, emotional abuse that I was experiencing with my stepdad. Just to give you one example, he was the very last night I would ever see him before we left. He was threatening to throw me from the second story window of our home where my bedroom was at,
Wow.
punching holes in walls and scream. I mean, if you've tasted some of that, especially when someone is drunk and belligerent, it is, as a child or even as adult, it's a paralyzing fight or flight, moment. It triggers all those things. So I just feel like if you're out there today, you're seeing your life repeat over and over. And a lot of times that's why we quit, because we're like, this again? I'm not going to do this again. Ministry, this again? Like, I'm done with ministry. I'm done with the church. I'm done with whatever. A lot of those things started way before they came to a head in your adult life. And if you can figure out a few of those things, which Jesus, oh my gosh, like he's knocking, he's using your life to knock on the door. And remember, he says that not to unsaved people. He's speaking to the churches when he says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. So he's speaking to Christians. He's speaking to church people. He's speaking to those and saying, hey, I'm using life to get your attention because I want to bind the broken pieces of your past that you've either forgotten about or you didn't know how to deal with, so you just moved on. I say that to say, like, as far as when I was 23, I started speaking full time at the Acquire the Fire conferences. And there's like 20 of these largest youth movement in the world, in arenas and stadiums. And here I am on the stage most weekends where Ron Luce, the president and CEO, wasn't speaking because we do 2 cities in one weekend. I was speaking. I was, kind of the protege. Here I am, and I'm doing all this great stuff for the Lord, but it really didn't come to a head. I did that for 12 years. It didn't come to a head till after I transitioned in my 30s, where I began to have kind of some of the stuff, like life situations were knocking on me and pressing on me, where I had to do some work, and I had to go back and begin to start that journey. And really, I'm maybe skipping ahead to in my story, but what really is the impetus of the new book, The Wholehearted Journey, 7 Skills to Develop a Life in a Heartbreaking World, was really, I started having panic attacks, symptoms of panic attacks when I was almost 40. And my chin would start to tremble like I was a child. My jaw would shake. I couldn't talk right. I'd feel overwhelming anxiety. And I didn't know what was going on. I went to my physician, got some blood work done. There's a few things off, but nothing like major or serious. A few things off, but we corrected those. And then, my spiritual life was in tune, was in check. So I knew it must be emotional. So I got a therapist, and this therapist walked me through the trauma of my past and connected it to my stepfather and those abusive years. Her name was Sharon, and in the book, her name's Olivia, but Sharon would ask me, so when you're in these meetings at the church and you feel this overwhelming anxiety, I was an executive pastor at the time. You feel this overwhelming anxiety. What do you feel like? She even asked, this was the really great question she asked me. She said, so in those times when you were with your stepfather, what would you do when he was being abusive? And I said, well, I would hide and I would try to get out of the way and go in my room and hide. And she said, well, what do you do when you're in these executive meetings? What do you do? And it was kind of this connection for me. I'm just like, I got to get out of here. Like that, the feeling of anxiety was like, I got to go. And the Lord, in his grace, allowed me to be in an environment that knocked on those younger places that still hadn't been made as whole and restored as they should be. And she was able to take me back there and be able to heal some of those moments. And what happened is this chin trembling that would happen almost on a weekly basis. I began to, and again, just remember, I'm a communicator, right? Like this has been my whole life. This is my bread and butter. This is how I support my family. And now I'm struggling doing that. So it's a big deal. Jesus knocked really hard on the door of my heart. And as I began to take this exiled child or those memories that I had pushed to the periphery of my mind, and as I began to reintegrate them first with Christ and begin to engage them, the mature present me, at that moment, the one I am at present. And I began to not push those young places in my heart away and exile them and brought them back into reintegration. I saw the trembling began to subside, the physical bitterness and anger and anxiety began to subside. And it really revolutionized my life. And if you're listening to this and you're engaged in this, get the book, get the audiobook. You can get it on Amazon or Audible. Listen to it. Let it walk you through these 7 skills. It'll help make a lot of sense of what I'm saying today. Almost all the information that I've shared today is in the book, but it will guide you through these 7 skills of Jesus and really help you to reclaim and get your life back. Like get unstuck. Find the life that Jesus promised and would say if it's abundant. And even if you're out there and you're like, I don't totally relate, with the trauma, I'm not totally getting that, but you aren't in Eden and you were made for Eden. So you've experienced trauma. Like we weren't supposed to experience death. If you've experienced a death, a bad breakup, betrayal, any of those things, Jesus wants to come and to tend to those places. And he's going to knock on the door, but he won't force himself in there. You have to invite him into your heart. And what I've discovered and what you'll discover in the book is that we don't just invite Jesus into our heart one time. That's justification. And we are fully forgiven and we are fully justified. But sanctification is a process over time. And so many, many times, maybe even thousands of times across our lifetime, we have to invite him specifically into those broken places because it gives him greater access to those places. The sanctification process is a process of inviting Jesus into your heart, just like you may have done in kindergarten or something as a teenager or in your adult life. And we invite him more specifically. Now, this place I've been betrayed, maybe it's been a spouse or a church leader or someone has betrayed you. We say, Jesus, come into this broken place in my life. Come into this betrayal. I need you to work here, healer of my broken heart. That begins this process and you will be amazed when you start doing that. You will be amazed at how much Jesus does and how fast you find yourself getting unstuck, how fast you find yourself feeling more alive in that abundant life. It's almost like plugging up a hole in a bucket, right? Like you allow him in there. He comes and makes it whole again. And the life that has been leaking out of you now begins to, you experience it, more of it in this vessel, this body that we are, this temple of the Holy Spirit.
That's a lot. I mean, in a good way. I'm excited about that. I loved hearing that. Others are going to be healed by hearing that and what you're saying there. There's so much to your childhood that you've shared before that they don't have to hear right now, because they can go to your materials, they can go and look at the things that you've got out there, and they'll see the rest. There's many parts to what you went through as a child and as a middle schooler.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. What happened to you, how your middle school years panned out. But here's the deal. You went to a Bible school. You went through all this stuff in high school and did these things, which is more bold than the average person. Obviously, you were being set up to do the speaking you were doing at a major, just mind-blowing events like Acquire the Fire. And then you went to Bible school, and it was after that, I believe, that happened. Then you got your doctor's degree.
Yeah. I got, I went to University of Texas at Tyler, and I got a bachelor's in political science and history.
Yep.
After that, and then I went to 3 years of law school at Texas A&M. And, I'm actually back. I start back into school again, doing all the ministry, making the movie, doing all this stuff. But I'm studying to be a therapist and a licensed counselor, just because I feel like we're doing so much work that it'll just help me to be able to serve people in a better way with that education. And so, yeah, that's going on. And in the midst of the movies, the books, and all of those things as well.
Well, I want to ask you about Harvard in a second, but 2 episodes ago, I have on Dr. Larry Shires, and Larry was a therapist in this area that I never really met. I had other therapists that I would use to send kids to that it was beyond where we could take them and help them because of severe problems. And Dr. Shires, we talk about, he was a law major and he wanted to, and he said, God, I will use my legal and I'll work with students. I'll do whatever you want. And God led him into therapy instead.
Yeah.
But he said, I got to use all this stuff because he said, I helped create the laws to help counselors do the right things, be on the right track, and protect, the counselors as well as the patients that they have.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
It is. And so what you're saying just dovetails with what he's done. And years ago, I had Dr. Gordon Greenall on.
Yeah, I'm still a counselor. It's just not a legal counselor.
Exactly, which you can be.
I'm a mental health counselor, yeah.
Which we can be, and especially in ministry, we're allowed to do those things. Tell me about Harvard, though. I mean, people say, well, how do Christians go into things like, of course, Harvard originally was a Christian school.
Yeah.
And so talk about your adventures at Harvard, what you studied there, what that one thing that you got out of there that was like, oh my goodness, thank God I went here.
Yeah. Well, Harvard, of course, if most of the people listening are probably leaning conservative, right? Like if you're
Possibly.
a believer in the Bible.
Both sides probably, but yes.
Yeah, you're going to be more conservative if you believe the Bible is inspired and, by the Holy Spirit and all of those things, which I do. But so it's definitely a liberal environment, but the research there, I mean, it's science. So it's kind of like world class, and you can't really argue with the research. So my professor's opinions were highly liberal, but the research, no matter how much the research and the science is there. So you can't combat that. Their interpretation of some of it was unique. I'll give you one kind of fun example. I was studying a psychology of close relationships. So romantic relationships, friends, family, but we centered mostly around romantic relationships. And there are several studies that I was researching for a paper I was writing. And the paper I was wanting to write was, how do you have a lifelong romance? How do you have a lifelong marriage that you actually enjoy? So I was researching and finding out the research, and all of the research, you'd be amazed at this. All of the research says, if you want a lifelong marriage, if you'll wait to have sex after you're married, you have a greater scientific chance of having a lifelong marriage than having sex before.
Wow.
The closer you are to marriage, one of the major factors, the closer you are to marriage, that you have sex. So if you have it really early on, your chances of having a lifelong marriage, and there are other things that go into this, but is really slim. If you're closer to marriage, if you're engaged and you're closer to marriage, those couples had a better chance. But the best chance scientifically is if you'll wait for marriage. So these very biblical things. Also, if you'll communication and conflict resolution, a lot of those things, hugely powerful. I wrote a paper. It had 3 different points of how do you have a lifelong satisfying marriage. And it was interesting. My teacher, of course, liberal, my professor, spent 30 minutes saying, well, there's all these other reasons, and there's this, and trying to debunk what the science said about how having a lifelong marriage.
Right.
But the science proves it to be true. It's amazing. I love when science catches up with the Bible. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's doing it all the time. Studying psychology at Harvard was a really great experience to just get in there with the science, the research of it all, be able to help equip the church a little bit better, help equip that. It's sometimes helpful when people are like, well, it's archaic, to wait to have sex, before, fornication or adultery. That's all, old and archaic. But all the science is saying, yeah, you have a better chance at what you really want, this lifelong relationship, if you'll do it according to the Bible. So that's a powerful gift to give the church, give young people as well. So if you want where I got some of that information, if you're listening, you can always reach out to me on, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You can DM me, and I'm really consistent there. You can also get my newsletter on my website, and you can reply directly back to my weekly newsletter, and I get all of that stuff. It's not like I have a large staff who answer. I don't have any staff who will answer the emails and comments that are sent to me. I do that directly.
Well, here's what is so interesting to me as a youth worker, and also as someone who grew up, that in my generation, I'm older than you at least a day, at least 2 or 3 days. I'm joking. I keep telling people I'm still 29. No. Several times over.
I'm actually 68 years old. I just
that's excellent.
Very great plastic surgeon. So
I think that's important.
A life lift, it does the trick.
That's important. And so give us that name too. We'll go there. But anyway, but
I know he gives me, a 10% of the work, bonus for just leaking his name out there. So.
Well, if I get some friends and family discounts, we'll be happy. But
and that is a joke for just anyone who's listening.
It is. It's a joke. Here's the thing. You say this in certain places. We didn't say it here. You did not think yourself to be an intelligent person until a certain time in your life.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that and how you ended up on this journey.
Yeah. Well, most of my life I felt really stupid. I really struggled in school, elementary school, middle school. I felt dumb, and I actually had made agreements. You believe your own self-talk, and you make agreements. And I don't want to go into the neurology and the neuroscience, but there is a place in your brain that when you make those agreements, it begins to run, and it runs in your subconscious. And there's a way to break those agreements, and there is a way to put other things into your subconscious if you've made negative agreements about your life. And that's in the book. Actually, it's in skill number 3 in the Wholehearted Journey. I talk a lot about that. I had this self-concept that I was dumb and stupid, and school wasn't for me. Honestly, when I gave my life to Jesus Christ and began going to church and memorizing the Bible and reading the Bible, I was about 14. I remember I read through the Bible in a year. I was reading about 45 minutes a day in my first year of like giving my life fully after that youth camp I talked about earlier in the episode. And I began to read things like, I have the mind, like, you have the mind of Christ. And I began to say, okay, well, I have the mind of Christ. Like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Greater is he who is in me than anyone in this world. If God is for me, who can be against me? I am an inheritor of all the riches in Christ Jesus. I can, all of those things. I can do all things through Christ, all of those things. I began to unknowingly replace those old agreements with new agreements and neurologically put it into that place, in that runs your brain in the subconscious. It was changing my psychology. Not only that, it was changing my spirituality. And I began to see improvement in school during high school. And I was not trying that hard. And then I would get a B and I'd be like, wow, like, what if I even tried a little bit harder? What could I do here? And so there was a real transformation that happened. You know that if you pray for 12 minutes a day over an 8-week period, focus prayer, just 12 minutes a day, focus prayer over an 8-week period, your brain is changed so much that you can see it on a brain scan. So I didn't know that information back there. And that's, if you're familiar with Dr. Carolyn Leaf, that's her research. But there's so much transformation that can happen in your body, that happens in your spirit and in your emotional life, and declaring those things, that it actually transforms the synapses, the relays in your mind, and creates new pathways. So, yeah, I want to just say, anyone who's out there who has felt dumb or you felt stupid, a lot of the things are, you can begin with very spiritual, biblical practices that are going to transform your life. Prayer, 12 minutes a day. And I actually have in the book, you can download or you can QR code, and I take you through 12 minutes of prayer that you can use. And if you do that for 8 weeks, you too will have a totally new neural relays in your brain that can be seen on a brain scan. So please check that out. It's going to be so helpful. But that was the beginning of it. Also, I just want to encourage you. A lot of times you are way smarter than you think you are, but our school system teaches in a certain way, and everybody learns differently. And if you can take time to learn the way that God wired you to learn, you will see your intelligence and brilliance 10x. So a lot of you may have believed, oh, I didn't get good grades in school, I'm not that intelligent. That has nothing to do with your IQ, and then also your EQ, your emotional, quotient. And being emotionally intelligent is way more hireable and usable even than your IQ in today's market and economy, but also in the world. If you have a high emotional intelligence, self-aware, other aware, that sets you up, and that is an intelligence that actually can help you to accomplish your purpose way better than somebody who has a high IQ. Hopefully that's helpful. I kind of shared a little bit about that. And then again, just be a lifelong learner. If I could speak to you, you're always in school. Most of us were in life school, and be a learner. Always, if you can, listen to those podcasts that are going to bring you new information and knowledge in areas of your interest and calling. Always be, have a book or an audiobook, which I listen to more audiobooks than I actually have the luxury to sit down and read books. So those are all things that I would just encourage you. Some of us, we don't come into our full brain. Well, our brain isn't really fully done. It's always changing and growing. But a lot of us men out there, you're going to hit your intelligent prime, or your brain will finally be finished growing around 21 to 25. So you might, if especially our young people who are in school, if you're struggling in school now, it just may be your brain needs to develop a little bit more, and some of those things that are going to happen at 21 are going to set you up to be a beast in college. And that's what happened to me. I hit 21, 22, 23. I was doing my bachelor's at that time and getting straight A's, and I was able to organize better. So I just say all that to say God has a plan for you. If you've agreed that you're unintelligent, renounce that agreement. You are more brilliant than you ever possibly could know. And your brilliance isn't going to look like anybody else's. It's going to be unique to you. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're a young person who happens to be listening or a young youth worker, sky's the limits for you. You have, people live to be 80, 90, 100 years old today. You have lifetimes to learn, to grow, to be what you wish you could have been. Right now, like I'm going back to school. I'm in my late 40s and I'm going back to school. And I never thought I would ever be a licensed therapist, right? I thought, oh, I studied psychology at Harvard. That's good enough, right? Like that's probably good enough. But I'm going back, and I'm not saying it may not be a structured educational system, but if you are changing, go for it. Take a night class. Just take one class. Do something different. It's never too late to be what you might have been. If you've lost years, and maybe, when your kids are out of the house, I'm just saying maybe you're in that transition. You're going to have decades more. You have not lost this game. Don't lay down. Don't tap out. You may be in a season that you can't do everything you want to do right now, but you have literally decades before you. So don't count yourself out. Shoot for those dreams. Write that book. Make that movie. Go back to school. Start that business. It's never too late, and you're becoming more and more intelligent with each year, with more experience in life. So hopefully that's an encouragement and will help someone to move forward.
Joel, totally encouraging. Something I believe most of us need to hear. In fact, probably all of us need to hear. I'm not going to tell, we had other questions. I said we might cover them all, we might not. But everything that you covered, I believe, is what we needed to hear on this episode. And I know that Ryan, my son, who edits this, is going to try to set up something with Casey. So I'll be talking to her sometime.
Yeah, she's my better half. So it'll probably be a better podcast.
I don't know about that, but she is amazing because I've talked to Casey before.
She's one of the best leaders I've ever met. And, we didn't get into this. I'll leave this with this, but those true love weight things back in the day, I took the challenge. And so my very first kiss was on the wedding altar to Casey, my wife.
Oh, wow.
21 years married. All of the stuff I learned at Harvard, we put into practice. I know there's a lot of the purity culture back then was bad, whatever. I'm just saying it has blessed me. I have 2 children. I have an incredible marriage with my very best friend, and you're going to get to hear from her. But if we could encapsulate Harvard, true love weights, all of those things, you can see that for your young people, youth workers, encourage them to do that. Not only that, if your marriage is struggling right now, I just want to encourage you that it's never too late to restart your marriage. And Casey and I have a marriage book out that we just released last year. It's called Personality-Based Marriage. You can get it as well on Amazon. And it's really great to help people in their communication, spouses. And we tie it in with the Myers-Briggs personality type, and it will help you to understand your spouse better and them to understand you better and to communicate better. So I would love to just offer that. And there's a bunch of other resources. You can find them out on joeljohnson.org, our other books and resources.
Well, Joel, you have been a wealth of information, and I believe there will be a lot of people that will take you up on all your offers and the things that you've got to offer. I am looking forward to this episode coming out and seeing the response of it.
Yeah, I can't wait. Hopefully you'll have me back on and we'll finish up because we have a lot more to talk about.
We do have a lot more to talk about. We will set that up again, and maybe in a few months we'll go through more of this because we need to catch up on where you are in the movie and all those things. Now, I believe if they just go to your website, they can find how to help support the movie. Are you still in fundraising for that, by the way?
Yeah, we are raising funds. You can do it one of two ways. You can go to wholeheartedmovie.com and there's an opportunity to donate or invest there. And then you can also go to joeljohnson.org. And if you want to give to the general ministry, joeljohnson.org/give. There's a button there.
Absolutely. And if you've ever been in ministry or tried to do anything like this, you know how challenging it can be. And I always support people who are raising funds. I know what it was to raise funds, how difficult it could be. God is funny in the way that he allows us to go through those challenges and really depend on him. But as Christians, a lot of times we take for granted that, God will do it in some way out there. But I'll challenge all of you to pray, okay, God, how much do you want me to give? What is my part in this movie, which is very necessary, very needed, and in Joel's ministry, Joel and Casey's ministry.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Oh, no. Listen, it's kind of you. It's the least we can do, or I can do on this podcast, and that is one of the big reasons to support people like yourself. Ryan will be down here in a few weeks. He and I are going to hang out for a few days. I'm glad that you guys are hanging out in Charlotte. I'm going to let you go. Tell Casey hello from me, and I will
surely
have Ryan set that up for us. And God bless you, brother. I am just real happy about everything that you shared today. I'm just excited for how people are going to hear this and the healing that'll take place in many, many lives.
Thanks so much for having me on today. It was an honor.
Thank you, brother.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.